This is Dave with NAPCO Tech Support. Today I'll be demonstrating how to build this hierarchy of air access radios by using partitions, roles, and privileges to restrict access to operators throughout a company. Please feel free to pause the video at any time if it makes it easier to follow along. In the previous videos, we covered how to create partitions and how to set up roles and privileges. In this video, I'm not going to explain every step to create the partitions and the privileges. Instead, I will explain the partitions and privileges I created and why I made them. I will also explain the operators I created, the individual access groups to restrict access to buildings, and the personnel created. This image I have created represents our fictitious business with 4 stores. There are 2 regions, and each region has 2 stores. We want our store managers to be able to add and remove personnel from their stores, but not the other stores. And we want the regional managers to be able to add and remove personnel and operators from their region, but not the other region. As stated in the previous videos, we can build a hierarchy by creating roles and privileges. If you haven't watched those videos yet, please go back and watch the previous 2 videos before going any further in this video. As shown in the first video, I started with creating partitions. I created a partition for each store and one for each region. For each of the stores, I selected the locks and the readers that are associated with that store, as well as all the pre-existing schedules and holidays. That's it. All 4 partitions are basically the same. The only difference is the locks and the readers and the radios selected. The region partitions are slightly different. I just have 2 locks and 2 readers selected instead. I could have just combined the 2 store partitions later when making the roles instead of making separate region partitions, but I like to keep everything separated. That way, if I have to make changes to the region partition in the future, it won't affect the store partitions. When I created the roles, I did the same thing. I made one for each store and one for each region. All 4 of the store privileges are the same. I gave them full access to the access groups, so they can create and modify access groups in their partition. I gave the badge holders in, guard station, help, holidays, lockdown areas, manual control, personnel, reports, status, and time selection. You'll notice I skipped configuration. That's because I needed to explain this in more detail. When I click on configuration, you see radio, lock/panels, reader, etc. These are all the things you wouldn't normally let operators have access to. But I wanted to demonstrate how you can control what an operator can see and do with privileges. What I want to do is give the operators the ability to push downloads or retrieve events from the lock in their partition. You can see under the configuration, I checked hidden for everything except panels. And under panels, I hid everything except download. This will give the operator access to the lock/panel section, but they will only be able to download and retrieve events from the lock. I will demonstrate later when I log into the operators. Lastly, for each of the stores, I assigned the partitions I created earlier for each store to the corresponding role. So the store number 1 partition to the store number 1 role, and so on. The 2 region roles are slightly different. You can see I did the same thing for configuration, but I also added operator management to the regional manager. This is because I want the regional manager to be able to add and remove operators to their region, but I don't want the store managers to create new operators. In the partition tab, I added the region partition I created. This is where you could instead choose to add the 2 store partitions for this region, but I chose to create region partitions so I can make changes to them without affecting the store partitions. You may be wondering why I haven't created an HQ partition and role. That's because when you registered the first radio to this account, it automatically created a partition, role, and operator named main. This operator has access to almost everything, but there are some things hidden from them by default. For example, unlike the dealer, they will not have access to the wireless configuration of the radio, gateways, and expanders. After creating the partitions, roles, and privileges, you would next create operators. You can see here I created an operator for each store manager, and one for each regional manager. I have assigned a privilege role to the operator that I created and the partition groups that can control the operator. Remember, the partition groups here are who has access to this operator, not who the operator has access to. I keep getting asked why this box is gray and why it cannot be unchecked. That is because the main operator has control of all other operators. It can never be taken away. This is why it is the main operator. When I go over to the regional manager, you'll see in their partition that only the main partition has access to this operator, meaning only the main partition can modify this operator. After we make operators, we want to make access groups. By default, Air Access only has two access groups, All Access and No Access. I created one access group for each store and one for each region. Each store access group is 24/7 and only for the door that belongs to that store. Each regional access group is 24/7 for the two doors in its region. You are not limited to just these schedules though. You can create new schedules in the schedule section, but by default you have 24/7, weekdays, and weekends. I just made these quickly for demonstration purposes. Finally, I created the personnel. I have a mix of badge holders and pin holders. My Region 1 has 2 locks that are readers only, and my Region 2 has locks that have both readers and keypads. The card holder named after myself has my badge pin number, my access group, and the partitions that can modify the card holder. That's it. All the other users are the same way. Access group, badge number, partitions. Now that we have covered the partitions and the roles, what exactly have we done? Here I am logged into the Manager 1 operator. You can see the only member in personnel is Jesse, and I have limited access to the plugins. I have reports under System, Personnel, Badge Holders in, Access Groups, and Lockdown Areas under Access, Schedules and Holidays under Administration, Events, Status, Doors, and Scheduled Changes under Events and Controls. Finally, only Lock/Panels under Configuration. Oh, and Help over here under the Login. Something I want to highlight here is the Lock/Panels under the Configuration. Remember earlier when I was showing you the privileges for the store manager and I was explaining the settings for configuration? If I go into Lock/Panels under Configuration, you can see that I only have one lock here. That is because this operator only has access to this one lock and no others. This is regulated by the partition. And if I select the lock and click Edit, everything in here is hidden from me. This is regulated by the privileges. All of this is an example of how the partitions work in conjunction with the privileges assigned to a role to regulate an operator's access. If we now log out of the Manager 1 and log into the Regional Manager, we can now see how theirs is different. Here you can see the 2 personnel in the region as well as the 2 locks. You can also see the options to set up roles and privileges for other operators under Administration, as well as view history and audit trail listed under System. You can create a variety of combinations using partitions, roles, and privileges. It may take some time to get used to it, but after just a little while of working with them, you will begin to see the possibilities. This wraps up our 3-video series covering advanced operator options. Remember, if you're looking for more videos on air access or you need a manual for a NAPCO or alarm lock device, head over to our tech library at tech.napcosecurity.com.